Okay, I think we will get started, and then as parents join, they can join the meet. Is the sound okay? Can everyone hear me? Just to double check, somebody could type yes or say yes. Yes, lovely, thank you. Okay, so we might start off children thinking about their spellings, asking them to think of their A sound. This is still a really good activity to do at any age. English, as we know, is quite a tricky language to spell. Certainly you might do this. I might give them a hint for another A sound. So we can spell A like this, maybe some examples, and then perhaps that will get them thinking again. Maybe you thought of some of these ways to spell the A sound in English. And some more examples there. So we can see there is already, in just quite a simple activity that you think is quite basic phonics, there is quite a lot to think about. Even planning this for today, I was amazed actually. You know, we kind of forget how many different ways there are to spell A. That's not even all of them the first. There's also these 4 other ways that we can spell A. So it's quite difficult to spell in English. I think we know that. So today we're thinking about spellings with me. Just a reminder of the primary team, Mr. Parry, if you'd like to contact him, there's his contact address, and Mr. Power and Madam Ratty, if you'd like to contact them about anything. If the Wi-Fi disconnects, we'll just try to rejoin, try our best. I think we're all good at these now. Mic off, just to avoid background noise. And if you have any questions and answer, please add to the chat or please interrupt me. And there will be a question and answer at the end of the session. So, and also just remember to be safe if you're driving. Not the best time to be on a device. So thinking about Anne Noysin's guiding statements and what we'll be thinking about, we've got our school vision of global education, local tradition, and our missions, our core values, and learning dispositions. So I think today really we're thinking about we are bilingual. Being mindful of that. You know, English is difficult to spell. It's difficult for anybody to spell. Some people, they're lucky, spelling's easy for them, but you know, certainly even teaching in year 6 in the UK, prior to coming to Anne Noysin, spellings is or can be a troublesome area for children. So it's just kind of being aware of that and how we can support them. Being proactive, kind of thinking about what things can we put in place, and definitely communicative, thinking about sharing what we know and helping parents at home. So things we'll cover. I forgot to put the introduction slide. A little bit about me. I'll add it in after. I'll add it in at the end. I've been at Anne Noysin. This is my 4th year now. I'm the literacy lead for primary. And, you know, my previous experiences, I've been here I'm in my 7th or 8th year of teaching now, struggle to remember now. So yeah, quite a broad spectrum. I've taught in year 1 at Anne Noysin, and I've taught in year 5 and year 6 in the UK, and I'm currently in year 3 and have been for the past few years. So I've got a fairly broad understanding of certainly everything down from initial phonics all the way up to quite the complex vocabulary, sort of grammar instruction, and the genres of writing all the way up to year 6. Today we'll have a brief look at how children learn to spell, what types of spelling errors your child might make. We'll think about prefixes, suffixes, and root words and how they help vocabulary and spelling. Briefly touch on, I think, how that helps with reading and writing fluency. And I've also got quite a lot of ideas and resources for you, thinking about high frequency words, common exception words, spelling rules, and the year 3, 4, and 5 and 6 spelling lists that are part of the UK national curriculum, which we do, which are very ambitious, but definitely worth looking at. We will come to those towards the end. So I tried to do a bridge map comparing Thai and English, and no matter what research I did or who I spoke to, it seemed a bit tricky, but I thought it was quite an interesting discussion point. Spelling is simply turning speech sounds, or phonemes as they're used when we talk about it in kind of an academic sense, into writing, which we would call graphemes. So in English, there's 24 letters in the alphabet. These can combine to make about 44 different sounds. It depends on your accent. We know there's lots of regional accents in the UK, so some places might have more or slightly less sounds. And also, you know, unfortunately, there are 250 or more different ways that you can spell those 44 sounds. So I was trying to compare that to Thai. I got different numbers. I got 59 or 72, depending on how you count in vowels. And then sounds, I thought there's more consonants than the sounds that they make, but when we include tones, you know, I wasn't really sure what that number would be or how we could equate it. And I also know that spelling in Thai is very difficult. So we need to be mindful of our children who are learning both Thai and English in this bilingual setting, and, you know, we need to support them. So just kind of being aware of where they're at. I don't know, would anybody like to add in the chat box? Has anybody got some numbers I could add on my bridge map? It seems like it was quite difficult to come up with a final number, or maybe a range, if you think. Feel free to add in the chat box anything there. So yeah, this is the part we're thinking about today. 250 or more spellings to get to write these phonemes. So, as we know, spelling is really kind of helpful. If we can read a word, hopefully that helps us spell it. It doesn't always translate. We can have really good readers, quite fluent readers who aren't particularly fluent spellers. So they don't always go hand in hand, but it certainly does support each other. And writing, so fast and accurate spelling of an extensive vocabulary is a key component of writing fluency. So certainly some children, you can see the children who spelling is easier for, they're more confident, they can write more freely, they have better flow in a lesson because they're not being concerned or getting bogged down in the idea of how do I spell this word. So it is an area that needs some attention, and there's lots of different strategies. So also many of the skills that support word reading support spelling. So when we think about phonics, segmenting and blending words to get those sounds, I think segmenting and blending words helps with our spelling and reading, and combine those skills together to go hand in hand. That's from some research there if you'd like to look at it. So where do we start? We start with basic reading before, you know, reading and spelling we learn together as we learn to write and to read at the same time. We start with systematic synthetic phonics, which is the kind of the way that we do it in phase 2, and with the different sets, or we just normally refer to it as phonics. I'm sure all of your children have already done this. SATPIN, we start with really simple CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant words. It gets a bit trickier. We think about tricky words. These are also common exception words. So just to make it more child friendly, we call them tricky words. So that means spelling doesn't follow the usual rule. We might teach children that this letter makes this sound in the initial stages of phonics, but there will always be times when it doesn't work, just because, as I always tell the children, English is very naughty, and it likes to play tricks on us. And so we have to be aware. We do phonics phase 2 to phase 5. It does go up to phase 6. And this helps children develop their grapheme-phoneme correspondence, their GPC. So that's learning all the different ways to spell the different sounds that we can produce in the English language, which we know there are many of. So sounding it out, this is a pretty common skill to use to break down a word. If we're thinking about this dinosaur there, I've got its name. I don't know, have an attempt to read that to yourself. I don't know if anybody would like to try and read it out loud. It's quite difficult. But the point of this example is that if I need to segment it, Parasaurolophus. So even for me, I've read that word many times. I've written this training. I've used this slide a few times. Every time I need to segment that word before I can say it confidently. So my point is that it's not children. I find as they get a bit older, they get a bit lazy, or can get a bit. Not all children, but they can kind of think, oh, I don't know what that word is. What's the word? So just kind of modeling to them and telling them, no, it's an excellent strategy to try and sound out a word. And if we know a word, try and segment it so that we can spell it in different parts. No one is too advanced a reader or speller to not need those blending and segmenting skills developed in phonics on occasion. As we get older, we get more practice, and certainly we need to do that less often. But it's just, putting a big tricky word up like that you can sound out together with your child. They should, together with your support, be able to kind of think, oh, well, yeah, I can break this down into segments and I can think about the sounds. It's actually not the only bit that might be a bit tricky is this or bit, but they do have that. That is in phonics, AU, or. So that's phase 5 phonics. So ultimately, it's still a skill that we use even into adulthood. However, it's not a perfect solution. Spelling it out, if we think about the word does, phonetically, if we're just using sounding it out, we could spell it D-U-Z, which we know is it's phonetically plausible, but it's the incorrect spelling. So unfortunately, we do need to aim towards getting spelling accuracy there. There's also other tricksters in there, very naughty English, silent letters. We think about words like climb, weather, know. Single letters represent multiple sounds. The letter C in cat and icy creates 2 different sounds, a chorus. And many sounds have with the same pronunciation, but vastly different spellings. And letter combinations like the O-U-G-H, which is pronounced many different ways, that is also a very difficult area. So we need more strategies as we get older, as children move past kind of year 2 or become more, their vocabulary increases, they're trying more ambitious language, they are, just the demands of the curriculum is the expectation is that, we are asking them to write more complex words and vocabulary. We need to help them with different strategies to do that. I was just checking I pressed record, so that's good. So thinking about the O-U-G-H spelling, with a British accent, it's different in each of these words. So I don't know if you take a moment to think to yourself, or anybody'd like to join in and read 1 or 2. We'll just pause here and think about all those different spellings and the phonemes that they produce. Well, the same spelling, different phonemes. My apologies. So we've got rough, plough, through, though, thorough. So I think an American accent that probably sounds similar. Thorough, they say thorough. So that's probably, I don't know which one is similar to though, but in English, with a British accent, we say thorough. Cough, thought, and hiccup. I mean, that's an old-fashioned way of spelling hiccup, but sometimes we will spell it H-I-C-C-U-P, but that is the original kind of older way of spelling it. So it's incredibly, or can be incredibly challenging to read and become fluent, and to, well, certainly in spelling, I think reading is easier when we've got the context of the sentence. But if you're just trying to recall the spelling for that sound, it can be full of pitfalls, as we can see here. So what types of spelling error might children make? Well, there's three main types of spelling error. There's lots of, so phonological, orographical, orthographical, and morphological. Sorry, the children are playing outside. If you can hear whistles, it's the end of their playtime. So what do these mean? If it's a phonological error, it means they're insecure in their phonics knowledge. So we'll go through some examples of these and ways to support them. Orthographical, it's plausible, it could work, but it's inaccurate. So if we're looking at DUZ for does, it's plausible, and certainly lower down in the school, we wouldn't necessarily correct that if it was an independent piece. If the focus was practicing a phonic sound, you wouldn't necessarily correct DUZ. But if a child asks for that spelling, knowing, you know, if they show some awareness, I know this doesn't follow a spelling rule, we would support them. And morphological, so children aren't aware of enough prefixes and suffixes for accurate spelling. So we'll go through each of these. There's a table there where they're all in, but I've kind of zoomed in and I've made it larger. So phonological errors are not phonologically plausible. Okay, so it's not like a child spelling DUZ for does. If that word does not sound like various, okay, that would be various. So there's a sound missing from their spelling that they've attempted, or category for category. So these are quite common, and it is quite normal if children are starting to try and just memory bank words, just know, which is what we aim to be doing ultimately. You know, we want to be able to know our spellings and to write fluently. However, there's a crossover time where actually children still do, if this is the issue, they still do need to be segmenting a word, thinking about the sounds, say it out loud. Various. Various is quite, you know, it's quite a tricky word, but definitely we're missing a syllable here. That's just various. Yeah, so we need the A, there should be an A there. So yes, this is gaps in phonics knowledge, gaps in phonics skills, segmenting and breaking them down. So to support with that, it really is back to basics in phonics, making sure that they know their consonant and vowel phonemes and they're practicing them. You know, you could focus on common digraphs. That's when two letters, one sound. Children probably won't know the vocabulary of digraph, but that just means 2 letters, 1 sound. Trigraph is 3 letters to make 1 sound. So these are we introduced digraphs. Well, there are some in phase 2, but certainly in phase 3 and phase 5, it's full of these digraphs and trigraphs to help children really do that. So it might be that there is just some revision and repetition needed here and some practice. You know, if they're common ones, lots of sort of phonic sounds that your child's getting wrong, it really is just focus on those with lots of examples and practicing. So one thing that I do in the classroom is if a child's made a spelling error like this, I read it back to them the way that they have spelt it. So you could do that. And I say, is that the word that you're trying to spell? So if I said, that says category, what do you want to write? They say category. And I say, well, is that what you've written? So that's that's how I try to help children with that one. And then you can segment with them and break it down. Orthographical errors are phonologically plausible, so they could make sense, but they're inaccurate. So they still need addressing. So, for example, we spell early like this. That's a phonic sound that children would be taught. I wouldn't, lower down in the school, I wouldn't necessarily correct that, you know, maybe in foundation, but maybe as we get into primary, we would start to think about trying to help them understand that we've got this sound like this, and it's the same, we can spell it with an A, just the same as the word earth, early, or circle for circle. So this kind of suggests that they're just relying, it's a bit cruel. We teach children to use their phonics, and then they eventually have to break away from only using phonics. They have to think about, the shape of the word, or do they know certain letter combinations? So phonics is a great starting point, but it's only a foundation. Other skills and strategies have to come into play for spelling to be embedded and secure as children get older. So strategies for this one, I think these are most of what I'll look at later on, because I think hopefully we're quite secure on phonics. If not, I can add some. I have added the phonics sound maps at the end of the slides there for you to, if you need them. So mixture, it's a mixture of decoding, but also children need to look at sort of patterns within the word. Sometimes it really is just memorization, which is not exciting, but certainly necessary. You can do rainbow writing with different colors, write the word, write again over the top of it in a different color, write again, think about the shape of the word. You can also do say, look, cover, write, check. Exaggerate the pronunciation, say it's silly. So this, certainly for me, as a child learning spellings, I use this a lot. I still use it as an adult sometimes, and I certainly use it as a teacher when it comes to words that I know children can have trouble remembering the spelling, because there's tricky words in there. So you can say it's special or special. One I always do is friends. I don't say you've got friends. I say you've got fry ends, just to help them remember that they've got that extra I sound in there. You can chunk longer words. So this is segmenting, and then it's easier for children to think about. Compa. There's nothing tricky about that. T, again, nothing tricky about that. And then shun. If children know this suffix, we can support them with it. And there's also mnemonics. Big elephants can always understand small elephants. So that one's a good one for the cause. So just lots of different strategies to help children to remember the ways to spell those tricky words, because unfortunately they are there. English is a melting pot of many different languages, Germanic, Latin languages, some Dutch in there, words. So it's really quite a melting pot of languages, which is why it doesn't really follow a particular set spelling rules in any great accuracy. It's not a phonetic language. It's not phonetically spelt. Languages like Italian and Spanish are much more phonetically spelt, and children actually they become able spellers much younger because there's less barriers to them. There's less need for these orthographical strategies, less need for mnemonics and things like that. So that's just a bit of a side note for you. So morphological areas, that comes from that word morpheme. They're phonologically plausible, so they do kind of make sense. They do make sense phonetically, but this error is because it's a lack of awareness of morphemes, which I'll explain. So here's some examples. We spelled tract like this. That is what it sounds like. It sounds like a t sound at the end of tract. So that is a phonetically plausible spelling, but we should know, if we're thinking about past tense, hopefully children know the rule. If we're speaking of past tense, it's an ED, usually, unless it's an irregular past tense verb. So there's always a rule, but always an exception to the rule. So we can help by knowing the rules, but also knowing there's flexibility within that. Or imagination, but imagination, perfectly phonetic. I wouldn't necessarily correct that lower down in the school, but certainly higher up in Key Stage 2, I would expect children to look at this or be aware of this spelling. And children are quite good. They are quite aware if there's a tricky part of spelling of a word. They are quite good at asking for help, or kind of, saying, how do we spell that end of the word? And then another example there. So morphemes, so this is a morphological error. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning within words. So this also helps children understand how to spell, also helps them with their vocabulary. So it can be the root word kind, suffix added kindly, or a prefix that comes at the beginning unkindly, and some other examples there. And sometimes you can really build up, you can have two suffixes on the end of a word that change the meaning each time. So if you know these root words, and if you know how to spell the prefixes and suffixes as you get older, I mean, that's quite ambitious vocabulary, but it's certainly that understanding of, you know, some words can be broken down and segmented and added on, and different parts have different meanings. And if something sounds like a bull at the end, it's always going to, well, usually going to be spelled like this. Sometimes it's spelled with a IBL. So this is kind of learning those spelling rules, knowing prefixes, suffixes, and root words, common rules. So if a word ends in F or FE, we change their plural to VES. So half goes to halves, knife goes to knives, wolf goes to wolves. So just helping children think about those rules. So teachers will be kind of covering that as it's appropriate. You know, this might be up on the working wall display in classrooms. If you're doing a story about wolves, or you have that there, you might look at different examples together. So this will kind of be spoken about and certainly practice where appropriate. And morphological strategies aren't just about the spelling and the root words and prefixes. We can think about, as I said, English is a melting pot of lots of different languages. I forgot to mention Greek, but Greek features a lot in English. So etymology is kind of the origin of words, where they come from. So for example, Greek air means air, sounds the same, different spelling, but that's why we have this spelling sometimes in English as well as this one. So aeroplane, we can also spell it with this one as just airplane, but aerodynamic, aerosol, aerobic. So that's where this, so we can look at that too with children as we get older and their vocabulary develops and their word understanding. So that's also another strategy, but well worth it. In year 3, we were looking at headings and subheadings. I said, when have you heard the word sub, or the part of the word sub before? And then they were saying subject, subway, sublit. So I said, yes, subway, that's underground. Sub usually means under or below. And so, you know, it will come up in conversation as we vocabulary check in all of our lessons. And this type of thing will be happening in classrooms. So again, it's helping with vocabulary. So if you know that sub always means under or below, that will help you if you see another word that starts with sub. And there's some research there to support that. So root words, prefixes, and suffixes can develop their vocabulary whilst also improving phonological awareness, decoding, and spelling. So it's vocabulary, sound awareness, reading, and spelling them. So these strategies kind of are hitting many bases to support children further develop their English language. Now, I have put about the year 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 vocabulary spelling lists. This was interesting. I read this from the Education Endowment Fund, and they said there is the list here, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and nearly all of them can be modified using morphemes. So if a prefix or a suffix can be added to most of them. So, you know, theoretically, if children knew all 100 words and they knew prefix and suffixes and rules to go with them and their understanding of word building, they develop that and can potentially spell, will know the spelling, meaning and grammar of, you know, well over 100 words, because we can take the word kind and understand and ly, and we've suddenly got unkind, unkindly. So it's just building those building blocks of words to understand vocabulary. You might see some things as children get a bit older, we might look at this, a graphic organizer for morphology. We might have the word appear. Prefixes re and dis, some suffixes ed, ing, ants, and ask children, what words can you make? And it can be, there's permission to fail here. It can be that children try to make a word that isn't accurate, but in this example, you can't really do it. Appearing, appeared, appearance, reappearance, disappearance. So just helping children realise and put together and understand what are the different meanings. What's the difference between reappeared and disappeared and appeared? How do these change the meaning of the word? So you can have really quite rich vocabulary discussion and learning by simply using something like this in a lesson that's focusing on looking at root words. It's just some examples of other ways it can be used. There really is, when we think about just the struct isn't it is the root word, but we don't use struct in isolation. It's always next to something. Construction, construct, destruct. Really, this is quite advanced. I wouldn't be using this with year 3, but certainly I would perhaps show it to them. There would be some words that they could create that they understand. Construction, they know that's to do with building. Okay, infrastructure. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to understand, but it's certainly exposure to those different morphemes and prefixes and suffixes help build vocabulary. Yes, we've talked about this. Phonics. So again, the main approach is phonics. Still very plausible, still needed. It's not something that we abandon. However, it does need to be supplemented. We need additional resources to support children with spelling as they get older. We teach spelling rules, but there's always an exception to the rule. We teach phonics, which is we say is full of rules, but as we get older, English gets more complicated, vocabulary gets more complex, and so therefore we need to have a number of strategies to support children. Again, I'll go through other examples of these. So one here that is analogy. I like to call this word families: call, fall, ball, stall. This is certainly lower down in the school, and that will help support children, but not to be abandoned if children are kind of struggling to choose the spelling. Looking at word families can help. And I've got another one. High frequency words. So, but this is found through research. These are the first 105 high frequency words in spoken and written English. This list is kind of widely available on the internet. I'll just put an example there. Ideally, we would want all children to be able to spell those words fluently. So when they're doing their writing, they are not worrying about these 100. So if your child hates spelling or struggles with spelling, an easy way to support them is thinking about this list here. Okay, if you think phonics, perhaps maybe they're a bit bored of phonics, or they already have phonics lessons, just for variety, this would be something helpful. A lot of it is up in phonics. Okay, A, that's a tricky word in phase 2, so is I. Came is phase 4. So that is that. The children do ask me how to spell people. Okay, they might not be sure on called. So that is quite, I think in year 3, there's still quite a lot of children, I would say, that, might stumble a bit over words like that. So we support them by having them up on the wall. There's the next 200 words there. I won't spend much time on there. But if something you're interested in supporting with at home, that's something you could use as well. This is the common exception words, or tricky words as we call the children. Yeah, these are all in the first sort of 100 or 200 words. Just a resource there, an example for you. I won't spend long on that. There's a link on these. You can see the mouse to the DFE, UK curriculum spelling, so you can see them in full, and it's got the spelling curriculum there actually. Now these are my one note about this is that they are challenging spellings. They are challenging spellings for children in the UK. Doesn't mean we can't be ambitious. Doesn't mean there won't be some great spellers who can't be pushed or or challenged to learn all of these. But, you know, we do have these in mind. And it's just there as a resource for you as well. This is kind of the expectation, but this is for children who are having their full education in English, and it is still difficult for a lot of those children. These are challenging words, but doesn't mean that we can't have high ambitions. So I just put them there as an example and a resource for you if you would like them. Yeah, I think certainly teaching the UK in year 5 and year 6, a lot of children would have found it difficult to spell all of those words, or even half of those words, consistently and accurately. So just something to be aware of. I'm sure you've seen this before, but just an idea there. Look, say, cover, write, check is always a way we can practice spelling. Other examples here, I've got quite a few. So you can break down syllables. I find this is more appropriate the older children get, because typically when they think about the word consider, they think, oh, that's really difficult. It's not. It's just a longer word. So if we support them by breaking it down into parts, consider, that's quite easy. So silent syllables or silent letters in words, I certainly still now as an adult will say to myself Wednesday as I write the date. So I don't think there's anything wrong in supporting children with this. My February, we say February, but there's an R in there that we don't really pronounce. Same for library. Depends who's saying it. So some of these sounds are dropping out of the words. And as I said before, the children always like, oh, you don't have friends, you have frighteneds. And it just helps them remember this silent I in there. So yeah, word families, lower down, we might look at phonic sounds, or what can we do there? And then as we get a bit older, we might think about word families, thinking about having the root word and what prefixes and suffixes go with that. So we can have morphological word family, reread, misread, read, reading, reader, and rhyming word family, which has the same ending sound, which is like here. So rhyming, onset in rhyme is quite, is where we would start. So certainly if spelling is difficult for your child and you're looking to support them, word families, looking at the rhyming would be more appropriate. And then if you're looking to perhaps challenge or move children's spelling on and their vocabulary, this, as I said, some really rich discussions to be had about making these words. And there's nothing wrong with having a discussion saying immovable and helping writing the Thai translation next to it. You know, children are bilingual, using their home language to support them understand English is going to be beneficial for them. Memory tricks, half, help a little fairy. We've had that one, big elephants can always understand small elephants, but because people eat omelette, people like eggs. Necessary, 1 collar, 2 sleeves on your shirt. For me, I always remember that one as I was about 15 and somebody said I was trying to spell it in a lesson. So 15, yeah, I was definitely in high school when I still wasn't sure how to spell necessary. And my friend said 1 coffee, 2 sugars. So that's how I remembered that one and still remember it today, 1 coffee, 2 sugars. But 1 collar, 2 sleeves, I suppose in primary school, more appropriate. Other ideas you can use is sometimes drawing an image around the word to help the children kind of embed this spelling. We can do spelling pyramids, where you start with the first and then 2 letters and 3 and come down. This one, I quite like this one. It's you call it out. So you might say to a child, how do you spell harbour? And you ask them to write it 3 different ways it could be spelt, and to tick the one that they think is the best spelling. Research has kind of shown doing this is probably takes just as long to get children to do this, look, say, cover, write, check, but actually it helps them learn the spelling better. So this is good, and it's good handwriting practice as well as spelling. But if you were dedicating some time to spelling with your child, this kind of asking them to write it 3 times the 3 different possible, plausible, phonetically plausible spellings, and to tick the one they think is right, and then to discuss it. That one, it'd be research shows that one, it goes into memory better. You can, depending on what your child likes, they might like to draw a shape around the a bubble around the word. They might, again, this is drawing pictures, terrible, it's rainy, cloudy, yeah, being rained on, suffered a miserable face. Spelling rules. Here are some of the common spelling rules. Change the Y to an I and add the suffix. So if we were to go from, do I have an example? Oh, my apologies. I will add those on there before I thought I add one there. So change the Y to an I and add the suffix. Double the consonant. So that's if we changing fry to fried. Change the Y to an I and add the ED. Double consonant if there's a short vowel sound. I before E after C, and plural suffixes, add ES after these endings on words. I will add those on there and after today's session. Sorry, I thought I'd added them on already. So we'll stop there. There's quite a lot of information I've given you. Certainly some examples. I find this is great discussion with children. Memory tricks help them with those words that they just can't seem to remember but seem to always need to spell, that don't follow any rule. People certainly is very oddly spelt. And then, yes, this one, research shows that doing that one, where you ask them to spell it 3 possible ways, different possible ways, and ticking the one is correct, it helps children with the more difficult spellings. And I will add some examples on there for you. And that brings, and then I'll just show you here. I did put phase 2, phase 3, phase 5, just examples there, the tricky words, just in case you wanted those to use at home. So thank you very much for your time this morning and for joining us. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask now or add in the chat box. And if there's no questions, please feel free to leave. I will attach these to the, in fact, I'll do that now. If anybody'd like to ask a question, please do in the chat box. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining. I will attach these onto the Google Meet now, just whilst we are talking, and I will add the additional spelling rules for you. So any questions? I'll stay here for another 5 minutes if you would like to ask anything. Otherwise, please feel free to head off and enjoy your morning. But thank you very much for joining today. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining, and I'll end the session there. Please feel free to email me if there's anything I can help with.